The courtroom was alive before Judge Judy even spoke. The murmurs, the rustle of paperwork, the air thick with expectation. All of it built toward a single showdown that nobody watching would ever forget. On one side of the bench sat Karen, the kind of defendant who believed the internet had made her an expert in everything. Her phone still glowed in her hand, her confidence radiating like a shield made of ignorance. And across from her, calm as a storm that had already chosen its target, sat Judge Judy. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. When Karen opened her mouth, the room fell silent. "I read this online," she said, waving her phone like a weapon. The line itself carried arrogance, that unmistakable tone of someone who thought Google could overrule a lifetime of law. Judy didn't flinch. She leaned slightly forward, eyes sharp, the smallest smirk curling her lips. It was the same look a lion gives before it moves. Not anger, not surprise, just the calm certainty of power. What came next was the kind of silence that changes everything. Judy said 5 words, softly, almost kindly, but they carried more force than any gavel ever could. "That's where you went wrong." The courtroom froze. Even the bailiff glanced up, sensing that this wasn't going to be a routine takedown. Because what Judy was about to do wasn't just a correction, it was a dismantling piece by piece of everything Karen thought she knew. Karen's expression didn't falter at first. She laughed, shaking her head. "Well, with all due respect, Judge, the internet says..." But that was her second mistake. Because Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look angry. She simply picked up a document from her desk, a printed law, clean and real, and tapped her pen against it once. "You read opinions. I read the law." The words sliced through the courtroom like a razor through silk. No one knew yet that Judy had already checked Karen's case file in advance. She knew the evidence Karen was about to quote, the fake statute she would reference, even the website she would proudly mention, because Judy had seen this pattern before. The arrogance of half-knowledge, the danger of confidence without truth, and that was exactly why this case mattered. What looked like a simple courtroom spat was about to become a lesson the internet would never forget. Karen smirked again, unaware that she had already lost. Because what Judy had planned next wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a revelation waiting to unfold. Before we go any further, comment below if you've ever met someone who thinks Google makes them a lawyer. I read every single one. Karen stood, a little taller after Judy's quiet correction, as though refusing to feel the sting of those 5 words. She adjusted her jacket, squared her shoulders, and smiled that dangerous kind of smile, the one people wear right before they get humbled. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she began, "the internet says that what my neighbor did is a violation of privacy." She tapped her phone again for emphasis, scrolling through what looked like a blog post covered in pop-up ads. "See? It says right here that if a dog steps onto your property, it's trespassing, and I have the screenshots to prove it." Judy didn't move. She let the silence stretch out long enough for Karen to believe she was winning. Then, without looking up, Judy asked, "And where exactly did you read that, ma'am?" The calmness in her tone was deceptive. It wasn't curiosity. It was strategy. The kind that made grown attorneys sweat. "A legal website," Karen replied quickly. "I don't remember the name, but everyone quotes it." Judy finally raised her eyes, and for a second, Karen froze under the weight of that gaze. "Everyone," Judy repeated softly. "Or just people who lost their cases." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Karen's smile faltered, her cheeks reddening, but she doubled down. "It's not just me," she said, holding her phone higher. "There are hundreds of comments agreeing with it. It's all over social media." Judy leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "Ah, social media," she said, her tone dripping with dry amusement. "Where half the people think they're doctors, and the other half think they're judges." The audience chuckled again, but Judy's eyes didn't leave Karen. "Tell me, ma'am, do you know the difference between a post and a statute?" Karen blinked, confused. "They both explain things," she said. Judy nodded slowly, as if confirming a hypothesis. "Yes, except one was written by lawmakers and the other by someone named Dog Mom 420. Which one do you think I'll allow in my courtroom?" The laughter turned to applause-like murmurs. Karen tried to interject, but Judy raised her hand gently, silencing her without effort. "Don't worry, Judy said, her tone soft but surgical. We'll take your research into account, right after we deal with the facts. Narration filled the air like a slow drumbeat. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a clash between perception and truth, between the age of information and the wisdom of experience. Karen represented every voice that ever shouted louder instead of thinking deeper. And Judy, she was the reality check everyone watching secretly wished they had the courage to deliver. What the audience didn't know yet was that Judy already had a plan. The trap had been set not with anger but with patience. Karen thought she was teaching Judy something from the internet, but Judy was about to teach the entire internet something about humility. Karen crossed her arms, muttering under her breath. I still think I'm right, she said. Judy smiled faintly, jotting something on her pad. That's the beauty of facts, she replied. They don't need your permission to be true. The line hit like a verdict. Cameras zoomed in. The energy in the room shifted. You could feel it, the moment arrogance met its mirror. The storm hadn't begun yet, but everyone could sense the lightning gathering in Judy's calm. The courtroom atmosphere changed from amusement to anticipation. Karen's once confident tone now carried a nervous edge, but she kept talking, mistaking noise for control. You can't just ignore what the internet says, she argued, her voice trembling slightly. It's public knowledge, and people rely on it. Judge Judy looked up slowly, that same unreadable calm on her face. Public knowledge? She echoed. Or public confusion? The air thickened again. Every word Judy spoke cut with precision, stripping away layers of Karen's false certainty. Karen fumbled through her phone, scrolling faster now. See, right here, it says homeowners can sue for emotional distress if an animal... Judy cut her off with one lifted hand. You mean the anonymous post on petjusticeforum.com? The courtroom laughed again, but Judy didn't. Her tone hardened just slightly. That's not a legal source, that's a conversation. And the law doesn't take advice from conversations. Karen's smile disappeared. She tried to stand her ground, but Judy had already begun dismantling her case. Ma'am, Judy said, picking up the printed statute on her desk. The law regarding property trespass is clearly defined by State Code 9.05. Nothing in there mentions dogs, cats, or imaginary emotional damages. She tapped the paper gently. Would you like me to read it to you? Karen hesitated, her bravado shrinking. No, Your Honor, she said quietly. I think I've read enough. Judy's eyebrow lifted. On the internet, maybe. Not here. The silence that followed was almost reverent. Judy leaned forward, lowering her voice as though speaking to a child. You see, the problem isn't that you read something online. It's that you believed everything online. That's how misinformation becomes conviction, and conviction without truth is dangerous. Every syllable landed like a slow hammer. Karen swallowed, realizing this wasn't just a loss, it was a lesson she hadn't signed up for. The narrator's voice framed it perfectly. What had begun as arrogance was dissolving into humility. Karen's posture slumped, her phone now face down on the table like a surrendered weapon. The audience was silent, waiting for what came next. Judy wasn't done. I've met thousands of people who think they've outsmarted the law, she said, her tone almost kind again. But it's never about who reads more. It's about who understands better. That line hung in the air, timeless and heavy. Karen looked down, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to disrespect you, Your Honor. Judy nodded once. I know, she said softly. But disrespect doesn't always come from intent. Sometimes it comes from ignorance. The moment lingered, a still frame of realization, pride collapsing under truth. And as Judy moved to the next file, everyone in that courtroom knew. This wasn't just another day in court. This was a masterclass in humility, taught in real time by a judge who never had to raise her voice. By the time the laughter had faded, Karen's confidence had already started to crumble. The internet had always been her safety net, her invisible army of validation. But here, under the cold precision of Judge Judy's scrutiny, it had turned into quicksand. Every word she had spoken dug her deeper. Still, she wasn't ready to give up. Pride, after all, dies slower than truth. She straightened her back, forcing a brittle smile. Your Honor, with all due respect, she said again. I know what I'm talking about. I've read dozens of cases just like this one. Judy's pen stopped mid-note. She lifted her gaze, calm but sharp enough to cut through air. Dozens of cases, she repeated. And how many of those did you actually win, Ms. Karen? The courtroom rippled with laughter, but Judy didn't smile. You see, that's the trouble with I read it online. It creates experts who've never left their couch. Karen flushed red, but she tried one last push. You don't understand, she snapped, waving her phone like a badge of honor. The people who wrote this are professionals. They have blogs and followers. Judy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. And I have degrees, ma'am. The difference is I earned mine. The silence that followed was deafening. You could almost hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Narration picked up, slow and steady, threading emotion through the tension. The balance had shifted completely now. What began as a contest of voices had become a lesson in respect. The courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching, captivated, almost reverent, as Judy dismantled Karen's ego piece by piece, without cruelty, without shouting, just the weight of reality pressing down on false confidence. Judy continued, her tone calm but firm. Tell me something, Ms. Karen, she said. When you go to a doctor and they tell you what's wrong, do you argue because an article online said something different? Karen hesitated, caught between pride and reason. No, Your Honor. Then why do you think the law works differently? Judy asked. Why do you think opinions can override facts? The question wasn't rhetorical, it was surgical. Karen blinked, unable to answer. Because it's easier to believe what feels good, Judy answered for her. And that's the most dangerous law of all. The narrator's voice described the room's energy like electricity building in still air. The audience wasn't breathing. Judy wasn't scolding Karen anymore, she was teaching her. And in doing so, she was teaching everyone watching. You're not the first person to bring me something printed off the internet, Judy said, flipping the case file open. But you might be the last who thought it could win. She turned the page deliberately. Let's go over the actual law, shall we? Karen's face paled. Wait, she began. But Judy was already reading aloud from the state code, her voice steady, precise, like an engine humming in rhythm. Section 905, trespass to property requires intent and measurable damage. She looked up. Did the dog intend to destroy your property, Miss Karen? Karen blinked rapidly. It barked, she whispered. I see, Judy replied, deadpan. Then perhaps the emotional distress is yours alone. The crowd chuckled softly and Judy's lips twitched into the faintest smile. The internet may have told you the law cares about feelings, she said, but the law cares about facts. That was the breaking point. Karen's defenses collapsed, replaced with something else, confusion, maybe regret, maybe both. So what you're saying is I don't have a case, she muttered. That's what the facts are saying, Judy replied. I'm just giving them a voice. Narration deepened here, reflective and heavy with irony. Karen had walked in believing she was armed with knowledge, but what she carried was misinformation dressed in confidence. She thought she was fighting for justice, but she had only been arguing with reality, and reality never loses. Still, Judy wasn't finished. She picked up her pen again, twirling it between her fingers before speaking. You know, she said softly, I don't blame you. The internet is a wonderful thing when used with wisdom, but wisdom doesn't come from scrolling, it comes from learning. The moment you confuse the two, you lose both. Karen exhaled shakily, her arrogance fading into silence. I didn't mean to waste your time, she said at last. Judy's eyes softened slightly. You didn't waste my time, she said. You reminded everyone here why we still need judges. A few audience members smiled, nodding quietly. Judy tapped her papers once more, her tone final. Now let's proceed with the real evidence. The courtroom came alive again, the quiet hum of tension giving way to whispers and exchanged looks. But something had changed. It wasn't about embarrassment anymore, it was about awakening. Karen looked smaller now. Not because Judy humiliated her, but because truth had stripped her of illusion. The narrator's voice carried this emotion like a moral echo. The problem with half-truths, it said, is that they demand full consequences. Judy began summarizing the case formally, but her tone held the warmth of understanding. The law isn't meant to make people feel right, she said. It's meant to make things right. And that's a difference too many forget. Karen nodded slowly, her phone still in her hand, but the screen was dark now. She no longer needed it. For a moment, the courtroom was still. No laughter, no arrogance, just the quiet realization that some lessons hurt because they heal. Judy glanced up one final time before closing the file. Ms. Karen, she said, next time you read something online, remember this. The truth doesn't need a trending page. And with that, she moved to the next case, leaving the audience silent and changed. They hadn't just witnessed a ruling. They'd witnessed a reckoning. Judy sat in silence for a moment, letting her last words breathe through the courtroom. Karen fidgeted, unable to meet her eyes. The tension was so thick that even the cameras seemed to hesitate before zooming in. Then Judy leaned forward, resting both hands on the bench. Her tone was calm, but it carried that unmistakable weight of finality. You know, she began, The problem with the internet isn't that it lies. It's that it tells people what they want to hear. The line landed like thunder in the still room. And you, Ms. Karen, are living proof. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The color had drained from her face. That's not fair, she started, but Judy cut her off. Fair? She said, raising an eyebrow. You came into my courtroom quoting strangers and screenshots, and you expect fairness? Fairness doesn't come from search engines. It comes from facts. And facts don't care if you read them online? The crowd murmured in agreement. Even the bailiff, stoic and silent, cracked a faint smile. The narrator's voice wove through the silence like music beneath a storm. This was the breaking point, the moment where Karen's illusion met Judy's discipline. Every great confrontation has its turning blade, and this was it. Judge Judy wasn't angry, the narrator said softly. She was exact, like a surgeon cutting away the infection of arrogance. Karen tried one final defense. But, Your Honor, I was just trying to be informed. Judy shook her head slowly. No, she interrupted. You were trying to be right. There's a difference. People who want to be informed ask questions. People who want to be right argue with the answers. The audience gasped, a collective exhale of realization. The courtroom wasn't watching a debate anymore. They were witnessing a dismantling, a moral reckoning masquerading as a small claims case. Karen lowered her phone onto the table as if it had betrayed her. I didn't mean, she whispered. Judy's tone softened, but her precision never wavered. I know you didn't, she said. But that's what makes it worse. Because you didn't mean to mislead, yet you did. You didn't mean to waste time, yet you did. The road to ignorance is paved with good intentions and too many browser tabs. Laughter rippled through the audience again, but this time it wasn't cruel. It was cleansing. The truth had landed and everyone could feel it. Judy adjusted her glasses, scanning the papers before her as if sealing the verdict in her mind. The internet doesn't make everyone equal, she continued. It just makes ignorance louder. Karen bowed her head, her earlier confidence shattered completely. Narration deepened, amplifying the weight of Judy's words. This was the crescendo, the point where the emotional thread reached its breaking tension. Judy's voice dropped low, steady, deliberate. Let me tell you something that doesn't need Wi-Fi to be true, she said. Respect isn't downloaded. It's earned. And you don't earn it by memorizing headlines. The air in the room tightened. Karen's eyes glistened, though she tried to hide it. The arrogance was gone now. What remained was recognition. The narrator spoke again, soft but powerful. Every great moment of truth starts with a single sentence, and Judy had just spoken hers. The camera zoomed closer. Karen's silence was no longer defiance. It was surrender. Even Judy paused, sensing that this wasn't just about a verdict. It was about a lesson that reached beyond the walls of her courtroom. Judy leaned forward again, her voice almost gentle now. Do you know where you went wrong, Ms. Karen? She asked. Karen looked up, her voice small. Where? Judy smiled faintly. You trusted information without understanding it. You read without thinking. You believed without verifying. That's not intelligence, that's imitation. The line hit harder than any gavel strike could. The audience sat frozen. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was enlightenment. The narrator's voice captured the emotion perfectly. For the first time, Karen wasn't arguing to win, she was listening to learn. Judy closed the file and gave her final sentence for the case. The law stands. The claim is dismissed. Her gavel hit once. Sharp, final, echoing off every wall like thunder breaking a storm. Karen closed her eyes, accepting defeat not as humiliation, but as awakening. Because in that moment she understood the real message. Knowledge isn't power unless it's true. As the courtroom began to stir again, Judy turned slightly toward the audience, her voice steady but reflective. Don't mistake information for wisdom, she said. One fills your head, the other shapes your life. It was her signature, the moral embedded in every judgment. If you believe Judge Judy just gave the most powerful lesson of the day, hit that like button right now, and let the world see how truth still wins in a room full of noise. The gavel's echo lingered in the courtroom like a heartbeat. Karen stayed frozen, her mind replaying Judy's words on a loop. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about what to say next. She was thinking about how wrong she had been. Around her, people whispered softly, some shaking their heads, others just smiling faintly. The internet had made millions feel informed, but only now did she understand how being informed without understanding could turn wisdom into noise. Judy began gathering her papers, but the lesson wasn't over. Ms. Karen, she said, looking up once more, I don't say this to embarrass you. I say it because I've seen it happen too many times. People trade discipline for convenience and call it knowledge. You don't learn law from a comment section. You learn it from life. Her tone was not mocking. It was maternal, firm, yet filled with the weight of experience. Karen nodded, her earlier defensiveness melting into sincerity. You're right, Your Honor. I thought I knew more than I did. Judy smiled faintly. That's not the crime, ma'am. The crime is pretending you do. Ignorance isn't shameful. It's only dangerous when it's proud. The crowd murmured softly, their earlier laughter replaced by quiet reflection. The narrator's voice carried the moral forward, tying it all together like a slow, thoughtful breath. In a world overflowing with information, it said, wisdom becomes the rarest form of power. That was the beauty of moments like this. Not the argument, not the verdict, but the transformation. Judy hadn't just dismissed a case. She had reminded everyone that truth doesn't need volume to be heard. Karen lowered her gaze. I'll be more careful about what I believe, she said softly. Judy nodded, her tone softening. Good. And next time you read something online, ask yourself if it's written by someone who's ever stood in a courtroom. If the answer's no, don't quote it in mine. A small ripple of laughter moved through the audience, light and genuine. Even Karen smiled faintly, humbled but grateful. The narrator continued. Judge Judy didn't just win the case, she restored the balance between arrogance and truth. In an era where opinions scream louder than facts, her quiet voice reminded everyone that knowledge without wisdom is noise without melody. The bailiff moved to escort Karen out, but before she left, Judy said one last thing. You've learned something today that no internet post could teach. That's how education is supposed to feel. Uncomfortable but real. Karen turned back briefly, her expression softer now, the anger gone. Thank you, Your Honor, she said, almost whispering. Judy nodded once, already moving on to the next case, but something about her tone lingered in the air, that quiet authority that didn't just command respect, it earned it. The narrator concluded, and just like that, another courtroom became a classroom. Another case turned into a parable, and another proud voice learned that truth doesn't trend, it endures. The camera panned across the audience, some smiling, some thoughtful, but all changed in small ways. Outside the courtroom, the energy was different, lighter, quieter, and somehow sacred. Karen walked down the marble hallway with a stillness that told a deeper story than words could. Her phone, once her shield, now rested in her purse, forgotten. What she carried instead was something no website could give her: perspective. The same walls that had echoed her arguments now seemed to whisper the truth she'd finally learned. Knowledge without humility is just noise. The narrator's voice returned, gentle and reflective. Karen came into the courtroom certain she knew everything. But what she discovered was far greater than a legal ruling. She discovered herself, because sometimes the loudest lesson is the one taught in silence. She paused at the courthouse doors, sunlight breaking across her face, her eyes soft with recognition. What had begun as defiance ended as awakening. Inside, Judge Judy sat poised, already opening the next case, but her presence lingered far beyond her bench. She wasn't just a judge of law, she was a keeper of reason, a quiet warrior in a world drowning in noise. Her final words echoed through narration. The truth doesn't shout, it stands. And when it stands long enough, the noise eventually kneels. The camera panned outward, showing the courthouse bathed in golden light. The moral unfolded with simple, unwavering power. Arrogance may trend, but wisdom endures. Because when illusion collides with truth, only one survives. Karen turned for one last glance at the courtroom doors, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. This time, she didn't need an audience to feel right. She finally understood. Silence isn't weakness, it's understanding. If you believe truth always wins over arrogance, comment, "Truth wins" below, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that prove wisdom doesn't fade, it speaks, and it's still being heard.